What happens when a prince who gave up his crown meets a comedian who never pulls his punches? Tonight, we break down the late-night interview that exploded into national headlines. An encounter so tense, it ended with one of them walking off set. Prince Harry expected a cordial conversation about his new memoir. But Jon Stewart had other ideas. It started with laughs. The Daily Show studio buzzed with the usual pre-show electricity. Harry, poised in the guest chair, adjusted his mic as makeup artists did final touch-ups. He'd done dozens of these appearances since stepping back from royal duties. Most hosts tiptoed around him. Stewart wasn't one of them. With his trademark smirk, Stewart strode onto the set. "Your Royal Highness," he said with a theatrical bow, or should I say former Royal Highness. I lose track of the protocol. Harry smiled tightly. "Just Harry is fine, John. Thanks for having me." "Oh, the pleasure's all mine," Stewart replied. "Been looking forward to this chat for weeks. Your book's been quite the read." And with cameras rolling, Stewart launched into his opening monologue. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we have Prince Harry. He's here to talk about his memoir, which has sold millions. Apparently, if you're born into the world's most famous family and then air all their dirty laundry, people really want to read about it." Laughter. Nervous laughter. Harry's smile barely held. Stewart leaned forward. His tone sharpened. "So, let's start with the obvious. You wrote a book that exposes deeply personal conversations with your father, your brother, your stepmother. Moments most people would consider sacred. Help me understand that choice. Because I grew up in a working-class family, and we kept that stuff in the kitchen, not the bookstore." Harry straightened. "John, for years I stayed silent while lies were printed about me and my wife. This book wasn't revenge. It was about telling the truth." "Telling the truth," Stewart echoed. "Interesting phrase. From where I sit, it looked like you threw gasoline on your family's privacy and lit a match. But hey, I'm just a guy from Jersey whose biggest family drama was over who finished the pasta." Another uneasy laugh from the crowd. Harry's jaw clenched. "I think that's unfair. My family controlled the media narrative for decades. I was just finally telling my side." Stewart didn't flinch. "Sure, and it just happened to come with a multi-million-dollar publishing deal. Pure coincidence, right?" Harry bristled. "Are you accusing me of writing this book for the money?" "I'm not accusing," Stewart shot back. "I'm stating, you got paid millions. That's public record. But by all means, go on about how this was just about your truth." The tension was now suffocating. "I think you're being deliberately obtuse," Harry snapped. This was about finally having a voice. After years of being silenced. Stewart leaned back, folding his arms. Silenced. "Harry, you've had global press since you were a toddler. You've never been silenced a day in your life. You've had the world's largest microphones. You want to talk about being voiceless? Let's talk about the people who work 3 jobs and still can't pay rent. They don't get Netflix deals when they want to air family drama." Harry's face flushed. "That's not the same." "You're damn right it's not," Stewart cut in. "They have real problems, not palace problems." Dead silence. Harry sat frozen. He hadn't been grilled like this before. Not this publicly. "Palace problems," Harry repeated, voice rising. "You think losing your mother at 12 is a palace problem? You think having your grief sold to tabloids is something to joke about?" Stewart's face briefly softened. "No, and I'm sorry for your loss. Truly. But here's what confuses me. You've said over and over that you want privacy. You want to protect your wife, your children. So why the book? The Netflix series? The talk show tour? Privacy isn't a performance." Harry didn't respond. His lips pressed into a hard line. Then, without a word, he removed his mic. The crowd gasped. And just like that, Prince Harry stood up, turned, and walked off stage. Jon Stewart leaned back in his chair, watching him go. The audience didn't know whether to applaud or stay silent. One thing was clear: this wasn't just an interview. It was a reckoning. That's seeking attention. Harry shot back, his voice rising. I never asked for any of this. I was born into it. I didn't choose the spotlight. I inherited the circus. Jon Stewart didn't flinch. But you're choosing it now. No one held a gun to your head and told you to write this book. No one forced you to include details about your brother's hair, your father's private thoughts, your stepmother's intimate moments. You chose that, and you got paid for it. Harry sat up straighter in his chair, composure cracking. How dare you reduce my experience to profit? You have no idea what it's like to grow up in a system that scripts your life before you can even speak. A system more concerned with preserving a facade than protecting the people inside it. You're right. I don't know what that's like, Stewart said, voice steady. But I do know what it's like to grow up with real-world hardship. I know what it's like to have parents who work double shifts just to make rent, to stress over medical bills, to wonder if your kids will even make it through college. And let me tell you something. None of those people get Netflix specials or 20 million book deals to talk about how hard their childhood was. The studio was still. The audience knew they were watching something far more raw than a talk show. So because I was born into privilege, Harry snapped, I'm not allowed to speak about pain, about trauma, about mental health, about feeling trapped in a gilded cage. Of course you're allowed to feel pain, Stewart replied, his tone sharpening. Everyone's allowed that, but when you're one of the most privileged people on Earth, maybe, just maybe, airing your family's secrets for a massive payday isn't brave. Maybe it's just entitlement dressed up as martyrdom. Harry's hands were clenched now, trembling with fury. Entitlement? He said through gritted teeth. You think losing my mother at 12, serving in Afghanistan, battling panic attacks and depression is entitlement? No, Stewart said. I think writing a tell. All that betrays your family's trust for money is entitlement. I think relocating to California and spending years trashing the institution that gave you every platform you've ever had. That's entitlement. I think preaching privacy while signing multi-million-dollar media deals. That's the definition of entitlement? You don't get it, Harry said, his voice cracking with restrained emotion. That institution you keep defending, it killed my mother. It was killing me, and it was tearing my wife apart. Stewart locked eyes with him. Then why not just leave, quietly? No press tour, no book, no documentaries. If you really wanted peace, why not just disappear? Harry rose to his feet now, looming over Stewart, his face flushed, his voice tight. Because they wouldn't let us go quietly. They smeared us in the press. They used us to protect others in the family. They fed us to the wolves so they could stay clean. And so you did the exact same thing in return, Stewart said coolly. You went public. You weaponized your story. You leaked, you blamed, you sold your side of it. The only difference is, you got rich doing it. That's not the same. Isn't it, though? Stewart interrupted, calm but cutting. You hated that they controlled the story, so now you control it. You hated being used for spin, so now you spin your own version. You hated the games. But now you're just playing them from the other side. The Harry faltered. His mouth opened, but no words came out. You've become exactly what you claim to hate, Stewart said quietly. You've just rebranded it. A cameraman zoomed in on Harry's face. His expression, once certain, now clouded with something unfamiliar doubt. The audience could feel it. A crack in the armor. A moment of reckoning. And for the first time all night, Prince Harry didn't have a response. I was protecting my family, Harry said quietly, but the fire had drained from his voice. By destroying your other family. Jon Stewart shot back. Harry, I get it. Families are messy. Trust me. I've got uncles I avoid like the plague. But most people don't resolve that by publishing memoirs about their dad's bathroom habits or their brother's mental health. Harry sank back into his seat, rubbing his face like he was trying to wake himself from a bad dream. You make it sound so simple. Because it is simple, Stewart said, his tone cold but precise. Not easy, but simple. You had two options: handle your problems privately or cash in and go public. You chose the money. And now you want us all to pretend it was about principle. I needed to tell my story, Harry insisted, voice barely above a whisper. Your story, Stewart repeated. Not your father's private conversations, not your brother's breakdowns, not your stepmother's struggle to survive in that family. Those weren't yours to sell, but you sold them anyway. Silence fell over the studio like a storm cloud. Even the air conditioning seemed louder than the crowd. Harry stared into the floor. For a moment, he looked like a man seeing himself clearly for the first time, and not liking what he saw. I never thought about it like that, he admitted. No, Stewart said, gentler now but still unflinching. Because thinking about it like that would have made it harder to feel like the hero. It's easier to be the victim. Harder to admit you might have hurt the people who once loved you. Harry's eyes were glassy. He looked like he might break, but then something in him hardened. He sat up straight. You know what, Jon? I came here for a conversation, not an ambush. This isn't journalism, it's character assassination. Stewart's eyebrows shot up. Then came the smile, not warm, not kind but sharp. Predatory. Character assassination. He echoed, leaning forward. Harry, I haven't said a single thing about you that your own book didn't say first. If this feels like an attack on your character, maybe the problem isn't the questions. Maybe it's your character. Harry's face turned ghostly pale. How dare you? You don't know me. You know nothing about what I've lived through. Except what you've read in tabloids. You're right, Stewart nodded. I don't know you. But I do know the version of you that you've chosen to show the world. And that version is someone who monetized his family's pain, wrapped it in victimhood, and called it bravery. That's not tabloid gossip, Harry. That's your business model. Now the audience was still as statues. Phones were recording. The control room whispered into headsets. Keep rolling. My business model, Harry said, stunned. I'm trying to help people. I'm raising awareness. I'm using my platform. Spare me. Stewart cut him off. If this was about helping people, you donate the profits. If this was about change, you wouldn't be the center of every story. But every cause you champion becomes a mirror for your own pain. Even your charity work feels like therapy in disguise. Harry was on his feet, pacing like a trapped animal. You're twisting everything I say, everything I do. This is exactly what the British press did to me. No, Stewart said, rising to meet him eye to eye. This is what accountability looks like. And you're not used to it because everyone around you either worships your title or coddles your trauma. I never wanted this, Harry shouted, voice cracking. I didn't ask for my mother to die. I didn't ask for my family to fall apart. I didn't ask for my wife to be hunted out of the country by racists. No, you didn't, Stewart said, his voice rising too. But once those tragedies happened, you capitalized on them. Your mother's death became your brand. Your family's dysfunction became your content. Your wife's pain became your platform. You turned trauma into a business, and you called it healing. The air in the room was heavy, electric, and the line had been crossed, and no one was looking away. I've helped people, Harry said desperately. People have reached out, said my story helped them survive, that I gave them strength. And that's good, Stewart replied. I mean that. But you could have helped them without burning down your own family. You could have talked about trauma without telling the world your father didn't hug you at your mother's funeral. Or that your brother collapsed under pressure. You didn't need to go nuclear, but you did, because it sold more books. Harry froze, then slowly turned, eyes blazing. You want to talk about going nuclear? He said. Fine. Let's talk about you. Let's talk about how you built a career mocking people. Tearing them down for laughs. At least when I speak, it's about my own life. You've made millions mocking people who can't fight back. For the first time, Stewart didn't respond immediately. The hit landed, but his counter came quick and precise. You're absolutely right, he said, voice calm. I've made a career calling out public figures, politicians, CEOs, the powerful, people who deserve scrutiny. But here's the difference, Harry, I punch up you. You punched your family in the gut and sold the footage. He stepped closer. Deadly calm now. I don't pretend my work is noble. I don't cloak profit in purpose. You do. And that's what makes it worse. Harry's face broke. There was nothing left but raw, bitter silence. And then he walked. No words. Just the sound of his footsteps echoing off the studio floor as cameras rolled, phones captured. And Jon Stewart stood motionless, watching a prince unravel in front of millions. It wasn't just an interview. It was a reckoning. You think breaking cycles of trauma makes you a hero? Stewart snapped. You think shielding your kids from pain means writing a book that ensures they'll grow up reading graphic accounts of their grandfather's private grief, their uncle's mental breakdowns, their step-grandmother's humiliation. You didn't break the cycle, Harry. You published it. The words hit like a hammer. The studio fell dead silent. Harry opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again. The silence was louder than anything he could have said. You've weaponized your children's future pain to justify your current profit. Stewart continued, voice low but lethal. And the truly tragic part, I don't even think you realize it. You've convinced yourself that betrayal is protection, that burning your family to the ground is somehow building a better future. The Harry's hands trembled, rage, shame, maybe both. Stop, he muttered. No, Stewart said firmly. Because this matters. You're not just another celebrity spiraling on my couch. You're a symbol now. Of this idea that trauma excuses anything. That victimhood is a blank check. That if you've been hurt, you're allowed to hurt others without consequence. I said stop. Harry said louder, jaw clenched. But Stewart pressed on. You've created a playbook, a blueprint, turn your family into content. Monetize dysfunction, call it healing. And now everyone with a camera and a grievance thinks they're entitled to the same redemption arc. Stop! Harry shouted. His voice cracked through the silence, startling even the audience. Several flinched in their seats. Stewart finally paused. Harry stood, chest heaving, face flushed with fury. The man who had entered the studio poised and polished now looked utterly unmoored. You want to know what I think, Jon? He said. Voice low and dangerous. I think you're a bitter, smug coward who hides behind jokes because you're too afraid to admit how hollow your life has become. You tear people down to feel taller. And you call it truth. Stewart didn't blink. You might be right, he said calmly. I probably am bitter, but at least I'm honest about it. Can you say the same? That did it. Harry ripped off his mic with such force it screeched through the speakers. He threw it onto the chair and took a hard step towards Stewart, fists clenched. You know what, Jon? I'm done. I don't have to sit here and take moral lectures from a has-been comic clinging to relevance by humiliating his guests. Has been. Stewart laughed, but there was no warmth in it. Harry, I'm not the one selling my family's pain to stay in the headlines. I'm not the one whose entire public identity is built on repackaged childhood trauma. You gave up a crown to become a professional victim. If anyone's a has-been, it's the guy who traded royalty for relevancy and still came out empty. The Harry's composure shattered. Oh, you want to talk about victims? He snapped, stepping in close. Look in the damn mirror. You've made a career pretending to be the noble outsider. Too pure for politics, too smart for Hollywood, too real for success. At least I admit my flaws. You built your entire persona on moral superiority and cheap shots. Now they were face to face, 3 feet apart, a decade of resentment between them. The difference between us," Stewart said evenly, "is when I take someone down, I do it to their face, and I take the heat. You write books." Harry stared at him, breathing hard. His mouth opened, then closed. He looked like a man realizing far too late he'd walked into a war zone without armor. "This," he said finally, voice hollow, "this is exactly why I left. This culture. This cruelty. This hunger to tear down. And I see now, it doesn't matter where you go. There's always someone like you. Someone who thinks cruelty is courage. Who thinks meanness is honesty." He turned without another word. Left the stage. Left the mic on the chair. Left Jon Stewart standing alone under the bright, unforgiving lights. The audience sat frozen, unsure whether to clap, boo, or breathe. Stewart watched him disappear into the wings. Then turned to the camera, expression unreadable. Part satisfaction, part something like regret. "Well," he said, his voice cutting through the silence like a scalpel. "That's what happens when privilege meets accountability. Not pretty, but necessary." The screen cut to black, but the damage was done. In under 30 minutes, two public figures had stripped each other bare. It wasn't just an interview. It was a cultural autopsy. What did you think? Was Jon Stewart holding Harry accountable, or crossing the line into cruelty? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more moments that pull back the curtain on what really happens when the cameras start rolling.